Yes. All righty.
Hi, it's Grace from Elwyn in Fountain Valley, California. And today I'm going to start a new book for us. And this book is Charlotte's Web. I think this was practically required reading when I was a child. But a lot of you guys might have seen it as a movie.
I thought the little rat.
Yeah, exactly.
You got it.
So now, if you didn't know this, if you look at the back of books that you don't know if you might be interested in or not, it's got a web. It's got a spider web, and the spider web says some pig. And then it says these. So that's a good place to start when you're looking at a book in a library or bookstore. If they have a little description like this, you might not love it. If you read the description, you might go, oh, I didn't know that. I thought it was about a pig in space. So this says, these are the words in Charlotte's Web, high in the barn. Her spider web tells of her feelings for a little pig named Wilbur, as well as the feelings of a little girl named Fern, who loves Wilbur too. Their love has been shared by millions of readers. So, sounds like this pig's pretty popular. And we're going to find out what's going on between the pig and the spider that she likes. Her name is Charlotte, and she's going to put some information in her web about him. So that's kind of unusual for a spider, right? And then this book is also by E.B. White, which stands for Elwyn Brooks White, Elwyn. And the pictures are little drawings I'll show you from time to time. It's not a lot like Stuart Little. Once in a while there's a little drawing. And they are drawn by Garth Williams. So let's get started on Charlotte's Web. But first, we must go past all of the introductory pages. Ta-da! And the first chapter is one before breakfast. So, someone says, where's Papa going with that axe? Said Fern to her mother, as they were setting the table for breakfast. Oh, out to the hog house, she replied. Some pigs were born last night, said Mrs. Arable. I don't see why he needs an axe, continued Fern, who was only 8. Well, said her mother, one of the pigs is a runt. He's very small and weak, and it will never amount to anything. So your father has decided to do away with it. Do away with it? Shrieked Fern. You mean kill it just because it's smaller than the others? Mrs. Arable put a pitcher of cream on the table. Don't yell, Fern. She said, your father is right. The pig would probably die anyway. Fern pushed a chair out of the way and ran outdoors. The grass was wet and the earth smelled of springtime. Fern's sneakers were sopping by the time she caught up with her father. So she had to run a long way, and when she caught up with him, this is what she did. She grabbed the axe. Trouble. Please don't kill it. She sobbed. It's unfair. Mr. Arable, her father, stopped walking. Fern, he said gently, you will have to learn to control yourself. Control myself, yelled Fern. This is a matter of life and death, and you talk about controlling myself? Tears ran down her cheeks, and she took a hold of the axe and tried to pull it out of her father's hand. Fern, said Mr. Arable, I know more about raising a litter of pigs than you do. A weakling makes trouble. Now run along. But it's unfair, cried Fern. The pig couldn't help being born small, could it? If I had been born very small at birth, would you have killed me? Mr. Arable smiled. Certainly not, he said, looking down at his daughter with love. But this is different. A little girl is one thing. A little runty pig is another. Well, I see no difference, replied Fern, still hanging on the axe. This is the most terrible case of injustice I ever heard of. A queer look came over John Arable's face. He seemed almost ready to cry himself. So he's thinking about, my daughter, what if she had been born ill? I wouldn't want her to think I'd get away with her. So, all right, he said, you go back to the house and I will bring the runt when I come in. I'll let you start it on a bottle like a baby, and then you'll see what trouble a pig can be. When Mr. Arable returned to the house a half an hour later, he carried a carton under his arm. Fern was upstairs changing her sneakers. The kitchen table was set for breakfast, and the room smelled of coffee, bacon, damp plaster, and wood smoke from the stove. Put it on a chair, said Mrs. Arable. Mr. Arable set the curtain down at Fern's place. Then he walked to the sink and washed his hands and dried them on the roller towel. Fern came slowly down the stairs. Her eyes were red from crying. Oh. As she approached her chair, the curtain wobbled. And there was a scratching noise inside of it. Fern looked at her father. Then she lifted the lid of the curtain. There inside, looking up at her, was the newborn pig. It was a white one. The morning light shone through its ears, turning them pink. He's yours, said Mr. Arable, saved from an untimely death, and may the good Lord forgive me for this foolishness. Fern could not take her eyes off the tiny pig. I think you can imagine that. Oh, she whispered. Oh, look at him. He's absolutely perfect. She closed the curtain carefully. First, she kissed her father, then she kissed her mother. Then she opened the lid again and lifted the little pig out and held it against her cheek. At this moment, her brother Avery came into the room. Avery was 10. He was heavily armed, an air rifle in one hand, a wooden dagger in the other. Now this is just like a little boy would be, right? He's got a BB gun, and he's got a fake rubber knife. Okay, I'm sorry. Sorry for all you boys in the room. So he says, "What's that?" He demanded. "What's Fern got?" "She's got to get for breakfast," said Mrs. Arable. "Wash your handsome face, Avery." "Let's see it," said Avery, setting down his gun. "You call that miserable thing a pig? That's a fine specimen of a pig. It's no bigger than a white rat. Wash up and eat your breakfast, Avery," said his mother. "The school bus will be coming in half an hour." "Well, can I have a pig too, Pa?" asked Avery. "No, I only distribute pigs to early risers," said Mr. Arable. Fern was up at daylight, trying to rid the world of injustice, and as a result, she now has a pig. A small one, to be sure, but nevertheless a pig. It just shows what can happen if a person gets out of bed promptly. Now let's eat. But Fern couldn't eat until her pig had a drink of milk. Mrs. Arable found a baby's nursing bottle and a rubber nipple. She poured warm milk into the bottle and fitted the nipple over the top and handed it to Fern. "Give him his breakfast," she said. A minute later, Fern was seated on the floor in the corner of the kitchen with her infant between her knees, teaching it to suck from the bottle. The pig, although tiny, had a good appetite and hopped on quickly. Oh, look, here she is, Fern, with her little pig baby. Now, so you can see if this is her little scoop. She's feeding her little baby pig with a bottle. So cute, right? That makes you want a pig, right? So the school bus honked from the road. "Run!" commanded Mrs. Arable, taking the pig from Fern and slipping a donut into her hand. Avery grabbed his gun and another donut. The children ran to the road and climbed into the bus. You got on a bus back then? I don't think you can do that now.
Not me.
I don't think so. Fern took notice of the others in the bus. What a bliss! She just sat and stared out the window, thinking what a blissful world it was, and how lucky she was to have a entire charge of a pig. But by the time the bus reached the school, Fern had named her cat, selecting the most beautiful name she could think of. "Its name is Wilbur," she whispered. She was still thinking about the pig when the teacher said, "Fern, what is the capital of Pennsylvania?" "Wilbur," replied Fern dreamily. The other students giggled. Fern was kind of embarrassed and she blushed. So, chapter 2, Wilbur. Fern loved Wilbur more than anything.
Oh,
She loved to stroke him, to feed him, to put him to bed. Every morning, as soon as she got up, she warmed his milk, tied his bib on. Okay, he's a baby now. and held the bottle for him.
Okay.
Every afternoon, when the school bus stopped in front of the house, she jumped out and ran to the kitchen to fix another bottle for him. She fed him again at supper time, and again just before going to bed. So that's 4 times a day. Mrs. Arable gave him a feeding around noontime when Fern was away at school. That's 5 feedings. Wilbur loved his milk, and he was never happier than when Fern was warming up a bottle for him. He would stand up and gaze at her with adoring eyes. Milk. For the first few days of his life, Wilbur was allowed to live in a box near the stove in the kitchen. Then, when Mrs. Arable complained, he was moved to a bigger box in the woodshed outside. At 2 weeks of age, he was moved outdoors. So now he's outside, not in the woodshed, which was outside of the house, but outside in the sun. I hope it's a nice warm day. It was apple blossom time, and the days were getting warmer. Mrs. Arable fixed a small yard, especially for Wilbur, under an apple tree, and gave him a large wooden box full of straw with a little doorway cut in it, so he could walk in and out as he pleased. Well, won't it be cold at night? Asked Fern. No, said her father. You watch and see what he does. So here is Wilbur's little home that they've made. He's got a little fence around it so he can't get out. And then he's got a little house, like a dog house kind of, with a little hole cut in it so that he can go in and out as he wants to. And they put some straw or hay in there for him too. So carrying a bottle of milk, Fern sat down under the apple tree inside the yard. Wilbur ran to her, and she held the bottle for him while he sucked. When he had finished the last drop, he grunted and walked sleepily into the box. Fern pierced through the door. Wilbur was poking the straw with his snout. In a short time, he had dug a tunnel in the straw. And he crawled into the tunnel and disappeared from sight, completely covered with straw. Fern was enchanted. Oh, that was so nice. It relieved her mind to know that her baby would sleep covered up and would stay warm under the straw. Every morning after breakfast, Wilbur walked out to the road with Fern and waited with her until the bus came. Kind of like a puppy, right? And she would wave goodbye to him. Bye-bye, Wilbur. And he would stand and watch the bus until it vanished around the corner. Whew. And then when Fern was in school, Wilbur was shut up inside his little yard that they made for him. But as soon as she got home in the afternoon, she would take him out and he would follow her around the place. Excuse me. If she went into the house, Wilbur went too. If she went upstairs, Wilbur would wait at the bottom step until she came down again. If she took her doll out for a walk in the doll carriage, Wilbur followed along. Sometimes on these journeys, Wilbur would get tired and Fern would pick him up and put him in the carriage alongside the doll.
All right.
Like this. Ha ha. She's got a pig and a doll in a baby carriage. Pretty silly, huh? So, he liked this. Wilbur did. He liked being in the stroller with the little doll. And if he was very tired, he would close his eyes to go to sleep until while he was under the doll's blanket. He looked cute when his eyes were closed because his lashes were so long. The doll would close her eyes too, because that's the way they make their dolls. And Fern would wheel the carriage slowly and smoothly so as not to wake her two infants. One warm afternoon, Fern and Avery put on bathing suits and went down to the brook for a swim. The brook is like a small stream. So they went down there for a little swim. Wilbur tagged along at Fern's heels. When she waded into the brook, Wilbur waded right in with her. He found the water quite cold, too cold for his liking. So while the children swam and played and splashed water at each other, Wilbur amused himself in the mud all along the edge of the brook, where it was warm and moist and delightfully sticky and oozy. Well, you probably think we talked about pigs in here the other day, how they like to get in the mud to get cooled off.
Yeah.
Yes, but he doesn't.
Jesus.
He didn't want to be so cold as the water was, but he liked the nice cold mud. Every day was a happy day, and every night was peaceful. Well, that's cool. Wilbur was what farmers call a spring pig, which simply means he was born in springtime. When he was 5 weeks old, Mr. Arable said he was now big enough to sell and would have to be sold. Oh no. Fern broke down and wept, but her father was firm about it. Wilbur's appetite had increased. He was beginning to eat scraps of food in addition to milk. Mr. Arable was not willing to provide for him any longer. He had already sold Wilbur's 10 brothers and sisters. He had 10 brothers and sisters, and he was the 11th pig, and they had already been sold off because we didn't want to buy food for them, and that's how you make money on a farm. So he's got to go, Fern. He said, you have had your fun raising a baby pig, but Wilbur is not a baby any longer, and he has got to be sold. Call up the Zuckermans, suggested Mrs. Arable to Fern. Call up the Zuckermans. Isn't that the one that had a pig on that TV show? Was his name Wilbur too? No.
Yeah.
Arnold Zuckerman. So she suggested that you call up the Zuckermans. Your Uncle Homer sometimes raises a pig. And if Wilbur goes there to live, you can walk down the road and visit him as often as you like. Oh, how much money should I ask for him? Fern wanted to know. Well, said her father, he is a runt, so that means he's smaller. So tell your Uncle Homer you've got a pig you'll sell for $6 and see what he says. It was soon arranged. Fern phoned and got her Aunt Edith, and her Aunt Edith hollered for Uncle Homer, and Uncle Homer came in from the barn and talked to Fern. When he heard the price, he was only $6. He said he would buy the pig. Did she bother to tell him it was around? I don't know. Next day, Wilbur was taken from his home under the apple tree and went to live in a manure pile in the cellar of Zuckerman's barn. Sounds gross to us, but for a pig, it's probably a happy place, right? So now, chapter 3 is escape. So let's see what it says in chapter 3, because these are pretty short chapters. Hey, I see Felipe. Hello, Felipe. Hi. Escape. The barn.
Oh, please.
Okay, the barn was very large. It was very old. It smelled of hay and it smelled of manure. Ugh. It smelled of the perspiration of tired horses and the wonderful sweet breath of patient cows. It often had a sort of peaceful smell, as though nothing bad could happen ever again in the world. It smelled of grain and harness dressing and of axle grease and of rubber boots and of a new rope. And whenever the cat was given a fish to eat, then it smelled of fish, you think? But mostly it smelled of hay, for there was always hay in the great loft overhead. And there was always hay being pitched down to the cows and the horses and the sheep. Look at Felipe. The barn was pleasantly warm in winter, when the animals spent most of their time indoors, and it was pleasantly cool in the summer, when the big door stood wide open to the breeze. The barn stalls had on the main floor the work horses, tie-ups on the main floor for the cows, a sheepfold down below for the sheep, and a pig pen down below for Wilbur. And it was full of all sorts of things you find in barns. Ladders, grindstones, pitchforks, monkey wrenches, six, I don't know how you say that, but it's those kind of circular things that you chop the weeds and the hay with. When you don't have a machine. Lawnmowers, snow shovels, axe handles, milk pails, water buckets, empty grain sacks, and rusty rat traps. It was the kind of barn that swallows like to build their nests in. It was the kind of barn that children like to play in. And the whole thing was owned by Ferd's uncle, Mr. Homer L. Zuckerman. Wilbur's new home